Hi guys, welcome back to the last video from Cooper River Boatyard here in Charleston. Abe and I have been here for a little over a month now, lending a hand on this Fountain Peugeot Helia 44. If you watched last week's video where we reinstalled the keel, then don't be confused by the fact that these supports are back underneath the keel. It's simply just because we're running out of time here, so I started shooting this video before finishing last week's video. We have a bunch of loose ends we need to tie up before we're ready to leave Charleston. We need to get the keels primed and anti-fouled. We also need to apply primer and anti-fouling to the sail drives, both of them, and also apply prop speed to the props. Just in case this is the first video from the little Charleston series you're watching, Ava and I have been here for the past month lending a hand aboard this catamaran. This is not our boat. The boat belongs to Ava's sister Nina and her husband Julian. During our month here, we've had the distinct pleasure of working on such delightful tasks as sanding and anti-fouling both hulls, dropping the keel in order to fix multiple leaks on the top of the keel, replacing the seals of both sail drives, fixing an annoying design flaw that caused the floor in the cockpit to get flooded when it rains, cleaning all of the canvas, mesh and clears, and a few other small projects. As I mentioned, Ava and I only have a short time left here in Charleston. In fact, I think we're leaving in something like 4 days. So I've come up with a somewhat ambitious plan to finish the last loose ends. Today that means priming both of the sail drives and prepping the props for prop speed. Tomorrow, anti-fouling the sail drives, pulling the keel supports away, which you saw in last week's video, and then also priming the keels. Then Monday we can anti-foul the keels, the spots on the hull, and get the prop speed on the props. That is wholly dependent on it not raining the next few days, which is a little bit of a gamble, but fingers crossed. I would love to be able to prime the keels today at the same time I'm doing the sail drives, but I don't want to remove the supports underneath the keel for another 24 hours, so that's why I'm holding off until tomorrow to prime the keels. In our case, the old anti-fouling and the primer had pretty much failed completely, most likely due to sloppy prep work, with only stubborn spots still attached. Yesterday I knocked down all of the failed coatings, so all I had to do this morning was a bit of detail sanding in a couple of areas where the original Volvo coating had failed. Then I was ready to wipe down the sail drives. I like to use one side of the paper towel per wipe to make sure I'm not just smearing contaminants around. I applied masking tape and then cracked open a can of Interlux Interprotect. I've used a lot of this primer aboard Athena and I really like it. It goes on thick, yet it's easy to sand in case you need to. And that is the first coat of primer applied to both sail drives. Check. Now, when dealing with paint or any kind of coating, there's a term called overcoating interval. That is that time frame where the coat you've just applied is ready for another coat, but it hasn't been so long that you need to do additional prep work to be able to apply that next coat. The overcoating interval is typically found in the TDS, the technical data sheet, or some kind of application guide. Looking at the TDS for Interprotect 2000, we can see it should be about 2 hours until we can get the next coat on there. But then if we scroll down here and we find Trilux 33, which is the anti-fouling we're going to be using, then between the last coat of primer and the first coat of anti-fouling, we need to be between 3 to 7 hours. The 3 hours is not so much of a problem. In fact, it's also better if you don't necessarily wait 3 hours, but you do a little finger test where you touch the last coat of primer to see if it's coming off on your glove. The paint can still be slightly tacky, but it shouldn't come off on your glove. Then you're ready for the first coat of anti-fouling. But the 7 hours, those are a little bit more annoying. If we go over these 7 hours, well, then we have to sand the primer before we can then apply another layer of primer, before we can then do the finger test and then apply anti-fouling. So there's a little bit of timing or planning involved here. The goal for today is to be able to apply that first coat of Trilux 33, because if we look at the TDS for Trilux 33, you can see that there is no max overcoating interval. That means if we can get that first coat of antifouling on the sail drives, well, then we can go home, sleep, relax, not have to worry about rushing back to the boat. When we eventually get back to the boat, there's no additional prep work or anything needed. We just have to apply the next coat of antifouling. While we're on the topic of antifouling and just waiting to be able to apply the second coat of primer, I thought I'd mention why we're going to be using 3 different types of antifouling. On the hulls, we have used this stuff, Seahawk's Q-Coat. Our primary reason for using this stuff is because it's what the previous owner used and he had good luck with it. And also, by sticking with the same antifouling, we're 100% sure that there's going to be no compatibility issues. On the sail drives, on the other hand, we're going to be using Trilux 33. The primary reason for using this stuff on the sail drives is because there's no copper in it. The sail drives are made out of aluminum, and combining copper and aluminum could result in a very costly surprise. Also, this is the stuff I've used aboard Athena sail drive, and we've had great luck with it so far. Last but not least, for the props, we're going to be using prop speed. Regular old antifouling doesn't seem to stick very well to props in the long run, so hence prop speed. Now, I haven't used prop speed before, but I have used Seajet's Pella Clean, I think it's called. It's basically just their version of prop speed, and it worked really, really well. Trilux 33 and Q-Coat are both traditional type antifoulings. They both contain some kind of poison that persuades things to not want to grow on them. Prop speed, on the other hand, works by being so slippery nothing can grow on it. It's essentially just a silicone coating for your prop. While literally waiting for paint to cure, I sat down and got caught up on emails. Eventually I got the 5th and final coat applied and I was able to remove the masking tape. While waiting for the last coat of primer to pass the finger test, I used more masking tape to de-hair my roller, leaving any loose hairs on the tape rather than in the paint. I made sure to tape over the little holes where the sinks make contact with the sail drives to ensure an electrical connection. After having cracked open and mixed the Trilux 33, the last coat of primer on the sail drive passed the finger test. I used the spray can version of Trilux 33 on the bearing housing because of all the little nooks and crannies, and then I was able to apply a very generous first coat of antifouling. It's the next morning. Now, the minimum overcoating interval for Trilux 33 is a surprisingly high 6 hours, so I only have 1 coat on here so far. I was gonna be doing the keel today, meaning priming and antifouling, both of them, but I've changed my mind. We'll hold off on that until tomorrow to give the 292 just 1 more day to cure. So that means today is prop speed day. Besides the medium kit to cover the 2 props, Julian also picked up this light speed. I have of course heard about prop speed before, but I've never heard of light speed, which is apparently an anti-fouling for your underwater lights. We don't have any underwater lights aboard Athena, so this is going to be a day of many exciting firsts. Having already read the instructions a bunch of times, I was well aware that the timing was very important, and particularly the timing in between the 2 coats of etching primer, but also in between the last coat of etching primer and the clear coat. We had already cleaned the worst of the old anti-fouling off of the props a few weeks ago, so all we had to do was to give everything a light sanding with 80 grit. 2 of the little bumpers on the Flexifold props had cracked, so we decided to replace them. Here's the old one compared to the spiffy, shiny new one. The new ones went in easy with a little tap from Mr. Hammer. It seems easier to apply prop speed with the props in place. The first step was to put on the rope cutter and then apply a little bit of grease and slide on the Flexifold hub. We don't want the prop to fall off, so I busted out Mr. Torque Wrench and set him to 50 foot-pounds as per the instructions. Using one of the blades to hold the hub works really well when tightening the nut. There's a little tab washer that goes on top of the shaft nut. That, of course, needs to be bent over in both directions. Fitting the blades is super easy. The pivot pins slide right in and hold the blades in place. The only thing to be aware of is that all the blades need to be at the same angle, so you don't end up with a lopsided prop. The instructions specifically mention not to use any thread locker on the big shaft nut, but it does encourage it for the rest of the bolts. With the propeller fully installed, it was time for yet another session of reading the prop speed instructions. Today is a fairly warm day, but we are just below the maximum recommended temperature. After having removed everything from the box, I donned gloves and used the wipes from the blue pack to remove any contaminants. Before moving on to the next step, I decided to stir the etching primer to not waste time once we get to some of the time-sensitive steps. After having wiped the prop with the red cloth and removed any residue with clean paper towel, you should move on to the etching primer as soon as possible. I mixed the hardener and the primer and poured it into a small tray. The primer goes on kind of thin and it likes to run and sag. 2 coats are required. The second coat is applied as soon as the first one passes the finger test. My favorite step was applying the clear coat. It feels almost like applying varnish. It's very important to make sure you don't miss any spots. Any areas that you miss will not be protected. Having finished both props, I was very curious about the Lightspeed product that keeps growth off of underwater lights. For this, there's no primer. It's a very simple process of just wiping down the lights and then applying the contents of the tube with a brush. Good morning, guys. I think we were kind of on the edge of where you can apply prop speed yesterday. It was warm, and then unfortunately, as soon as I started wiping down the props, the wind picked up. But the prop speed is on there, and it looks good. The very first thing I did this morning was to remove the supports under the keel. As you guys saw in last week's video, that went perfectly fine, no drama there. And with the supports removed, that means we're finally ready to apply primer and then anti-fouling. We'll be using the same anti-fouling we used on the hull, and that of course also means we're going to be sticking with the same primer. Personally, I do prefer Interprotect over Tough Stuff, but then again, I have worked a lot more with Interprotect than Tough Stuff. At least in my experience, Interprotect seems to go on a little bit nicer, and also Interprotect seems to be, at least in my experience, easier to sand than Tough Stuff. But yeah, let's get some primer on the keel. Ta-da! A fully anti-fouled keel. Apparently the Q-coat has a very short overcoating interval. According to the TDS, it's only 1 hour. So I've been able to apply 3 coats. So we're done. This is a mighty spiffy looking keel, if I do say so myself. You can't even see that it's repaired. Speaking of done, we also got the 3rd coat of anti-fouling on the sail drives. So yeah, that was actually the very last thing on the to-do list. On a quick little keel related note, I keep seeing comments saying that we should also drop the other keel, but I'll just repeat that there is absolutely no signs that there's water inside of that keel. The thermal camera didn't show anything, there's no weeping, so yeah, seeing as the keel doesn't have any damage, I don't think it's worth it to drop it and do all of that work. Sure, the expanding foam application in that other keel is probably horrible, but still, if it's not leaking, there's no water in there, then I don't see the point in dropping it. Remember, these keels are not a part of the hull, so if we get some kind of damage there or something happens, it won't affect the integrity of the hull.
Hi guys, Julian Acosta here. I just wanted to take a second to say thank you to Mads and Ava for all of the invaluable help and knowledge that they have given us through this process and all of these projects that you guys have been following along on. Thank you for supporting them week after week. I know exactly how lucky I am to have Mads and Ava in my life. There are two people that I love dearly, and they are just as awesome in real life as they are every week when they come into your lives. So if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like. See you.
And thank you to Julian for allowing me to get in a bit of oh glorious sanding. But yeah, that's it guys. We are done here in Charleston. I'm gonna go pick up a rental car later today, and then tomorrow Ava and I start heading north towards the Chesapeake, towards Annapolis, and towards the boat show. On our way north, we're going to check out a couple of boats. I don't think any of those are going to be a replacement for Athena, but they may offer us some insight into what we would like in our future Athena replacement. And I think we might film at least one of them. After the boat show, I'm going to head straight back to Trinidad because we have a lot of work to get done aboard Athena, and we only have about a month worth of time to do that until we want to start heading north in the Caribbean. So yeah, lots of DIY coming up. And on that cheerful note, I'll end this week's video here. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like. See you!